It
My
was
first
not
my
clear.
first podcast, everybody.
First podcast. Okay.
I know.
Welcome to the Inclusion Starts Now podcast. I'm Kayla, and today I have a friend that I actually met in grad school at a very great program at San Francisco State University. I'll plug that in there for anyone who cares. Her name is Dana, and she has a new last name, and I don't know it other than when you sent me your email, and I was like, oh, yeah, it's a different last name now. But Dana, would you like to introduce
Hi.
yourself?
Sure. I'm Dana Gunnarsson. I'm an education specialist, and I had to do the math today since I was coming on this podcast. And I've been a teacher in a special education classroom for 11 years.
Wow,
You
that
are old, Kayla.
well, yeah, that never makes me feel young thinking about how long I've been in education. But staying in the classroom, I feel like is really unique because the special ed teacher burnout is like 5 years, and you've doubled that like a badass. What are your
Yeah.
tips?
I don't know if I have any tips. I just honestly I really love what I do. Like I've moved around a lot, so I've been at a lot of different schools, so maybe that helps. Um, and I've been lucky to find really awesome sites. So I'm currently at an awesome one, but I've also been at some not so awesome ones. So I would just encourage anybody if you're in a place where you don't feel like that's your spot, then, there's lots of other classrooms to go to, lots of other school sites that need you. So I don't know, just move around if that's your prerogative, but it's been mine. So
Well, this was actually one of the questions I wanted to ask you because I remember you telling me when I was going through the interview process to when I was moving, um, you gave me some really good tips of basically what making my expectations clear going into a job interview, especially as a special education teacher, and even more especially when you're wanting inclusive settings.
mhm.
So what kind of interview questions did you ask your districts, or what kind of tips do you have for people who might be looking for a new teaching job?
I would just be clear about what you want. Like I said, I've kind of moved around a lot, and that was mostly due to my own self relocating. But when they ask you at the end of your interview, which they will, do you have any questions for us? I'll always ask, like, what's your policy on inclusion? How do you feel about students with extensive support needs being included in general education classes, both electives and academic classes? Um, and then I'll also ask, like, what does inclusion look like at your site now? How open are you? And a lot of times they say that they're very open because, that's the direction that districts want to be moving in. I don't know if they're always moving as quickly as they should be or want to be, but they're always pretty open to it. um, until you get there, and then you can really get a feel for it. But my most recent experience, I was hired by a district to work at a middle school, gave it my best shot, had a great experience. It was my first time working with the lower grades, that's what I call it. But I've always been high school transition age. I know Kayla's laughing because she's a elementary school.
I was going to say that was what I was thinking I was going to introduce you as, because everyone would say that we were like in grad school, that we were like our counterparts, that like
Uh-huh,
we were very similar teachers, but I was elementary school and you were secondary, or
for
I was
sure.
primary and secondary.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are counterparts. That's a good way to put it. Um, but anyways, I was working at a middle school, did my best for 2 years and made some connections. Middle school, I enjoyed it. I had a great experience. It was a good learning stepping stone, seeing like where my kids that I typically work with come from and how I can grow in my high school program. And then I transferred to high school because that's just like more of my personality. So, I would also say like, don't burn any bridges, like if you have a job and you're at a site, just because one site might not align with your ideals doesn't mean another site won't. So, like the reason I got my current job in high school, like technically I wasn't allowed to transfer. I wasn't tenured. I wasn't eligible to transfer yet, but a program specialist, she really liked me and she thought that I would be a good fit for a new program that was opening up at a high school. And she talked to the superintendent of special education, and he was, I don't even think he knew who I was, but he says he did, but I don't really think he did at all. But he was like, yeah, let's go for it. So they made some special exception for me. So I guess that's another tip is like, don't burn any bridges. Just, like do your thing, do the absolute best you can. If it's not your jam, do your absolute best, like be a gentle advocate. I read this essay once about gentle advocacy. Be a gentle advocate, um, be professional, and people will take notice, and you can go ahead and move along to somewhere that's going to be a better fit for you.
How would you describe gentle advocate?
I think that there's a difference between like being a bull in a china shop and being a good advocate. So um just always, this is going to sound kind of cringe, but I guess just being friendly and being kind about what you're asking for, like
Cringiest thing
respecting
I've
that.
ever heard.
What?
I said that's the cringiest thing I've ever heard.
No. Well, I mean,
I'm kidding. That's not cringy
sometimes it
at
makes
all.
me cringe thinking about how I have to be like, yeah, well, what I'm thinking, when what you really want to say is, well, the law says.
Mhm.
Um, but like just respecting that everybody has a different background, and there's a lot of general education teachers that number one may have gone to school a really, really long time ago and may not be current with best practice or even current practice or the law, and have been doing what they've been doing for a long time, and change might be really hard for them, and change is hard for everybody. And kind of just respecting that and letting them know that this is what you're going to do, but you're going to be there for them every step of the way. And here's my phone number and here's my email. And when you call me, I'm going to show up. And here's my very best paraprofessional that's going to support you. And, we're going to make this happen together. And doing a lot of checking in, I would say, is something that I do. Like I check in like once a week in person, on the phone, by email, kind of just getting to know what the teacher's preference is. There's some teachers that do better with email, and there's some teachers that you really have to catch them in person, or else you're not ever going to catch up with them. So,
Well, I think those are all really great tips. And I wish I remembered or even thought about all those tips on my last year teaching because I definitely came in very hot where I felt like my interview, I talked about inclusion and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. This like look at what I've done at my last school. And I was so excited to like bring that to the school. And then my first day, I'm like, okay, so what like general ed teachers do you think like would want to work with me? Like asking it was like the psych and the behavior therapist or something. And they both were just like, oh, well, like your kids don't get included. Like they're too hard. And I was just like, what? Like my whole interview was just about inclusion. But I don't feel like I went back and asked them those questions. I don't feel like I asked, like, I wish I made it more clear that if I'm going to be their teacher, that like my students are going to be increasing their minutes in a general ed classroom. And then when like, things just started happening, I felt like I was just really dysregulated. Like I would get really mad. I got really mad at the vice principal once for suspending a student when no one followed their behavior intervention plan. And then they just suspended him. And I was like, what lesson is that teaching? Like that nothing got followed. And looking back at that, I do not like how I handled it, but I wish I wish I just had those moments of like remembering that, yeah, some of these teachers have never really learned about inclusion or they've never learned about like how to support a child with a disability. And I feel like Then I don't know. I just wish there were ways I could keep remembering those, like, that everyone's gonna start somewhere and no one's gonna be like wherever I am in my inclusion journey.
For sure. But I mean, your experience, that's really frustrating. And I can see, I mean, you're so passionate, right? You're so passionate about your students and you work with them every day. And, naturally, as individuals that support students with disabilities, we support a smaller number of kids. So we become a lot closer with them and they're like a second family almost, right? Like some of my students, I'm one of the three people in the world that they communicate with, So it's like you're very close to your kids. So it can feel really close to home and personal when people don't, in your eyes, my eyes, whatever, respect them or give them what they deserve. But yeah, everybody's coming from a different playing field. So I just always try to remember that. Not that I've handled every situation perfectly. It has not happened and it still will never happen.
Yeah.
But it's for sure a learning experience. And I don't know, celebrate small victories, right? Like
Yes.
just take little tiny steps. And I think I also learned like one of my first year teaching, it was a bad experience, kind of like you had. And it felt like every step I'd make towards inclusion, there was a couple particular people at my school that would just be like huge roadblocks. And I think it was a thing of like they've been doing something for this amount of time and it was a thing about change for them. And it was also a control thing for them. Like it was the department head and an admin, and they just wanted to control, right? Even though I was going to all these teachers and they were super open and ready for it. And then they would just come and like roadblock me and I was getting so frustrated. um but like once you look back at where you came from, like, okay, well, at the beginning of the year my kids were just in my classroom all day long, and then by the end of the year, if you could just like increase it just a little bit, just think about like every year building on to that, all the change that you could make, I guess. That's what I try to
Yeah.
think of, even though after that first year I remember um an instructor that both Kayla and I had, they got me out of that site because it was a bad site. Our whole grad program was like, you can't be here. And I wanted to stay because I loved the kids. Whatever I lacked in my experience as a first year teacher, I made up for in love for sure. But she told me like, you're never going to be able to change this site by yourself. Like it's not happening. Like you could be the most amazing teacher in the world, you're never going to be able to do this alone. And she helped me get another job at another place. And I was much more effective there. But, like
Yeah.
just small steps in the right direction. And I'm sure that site's doing better now than they were before I was there, hopefully.
That's so optimistic of you.
I think they are. I mean, it can't possibly be any worse than it was. I think about that. It cannot possibly be. So it's got to be better.
Well, it seems like and I mean, it seems like I know that you are very good at connecting with other people. And I know that I've personally have talked to a lot of teachers who struggle connecting with special ed teachers who have a hard time connecting with the general ed teachers. Do you have any sort of tips of things that you would do just like get that bond going, get them to, I don't know, make that trusted relationship happen?
Yeah. It's hard. It is hard. I'm gonna just recognize that. It's hard as a special education teacher, especially a teacher that works with students with moderate to extensive support needs, because sometimes we can feel isolated, right? Like there might be you and one other colleague, or you might be there on your own. So the first thing that I recommend is just coming, like if you're starting a new program at a new school and you are completely alone, that is an advantage, and use that to your advantage. Like just come in and you get to dictate how the program is. That happened to me at one site. There was like no inclusion happening there at all. And I just came in and was like, yep, this is what I'm supposed to do. And like I put all my kids, they were included over half of their day, almost all of them, just because I came in and was like, this is just what we're doing. This is my new program. It's called Bridges. Welcome. Um, they're going to be included half of their day. And I walked my little rear end all around that campus the first, like, 3 days that you're back before the kids come back. And I met every single general education teacher and talked about my kids that I pretended to know, even though I've never met them before. Talked about how awesome they were, that they were going to be in their class, that I was going to support them 100%. And then I followed up with them constantly. So, I mean, I think I talked about that already, but that's one way to go about it. I would also say, girl, I hate doing this. I am not like a social, Kayla's much more of a social butterfly than I am. Um, Go to the things. So go to the happy hours, don't go to the teachers lounge though. Don't do that. That's not a good place. You don't want to be there. It's just a lot of teachers complaining.
That is really funny because I was in elementary school. All my elementary school lounges were great. I mean,
Right.
yeah, people complained, but it was also like, I don't know, people talked. I felt like it was a very happy, positive social
Okay,
experience.
that's good.
Um, High school, when I was like a student teacher in a high school, people didn't talk at like it felt very different, like a little bit more cliquey. And then a lot of teachers ate in their classroom. And then when I became a middle school teacher, they didn't even have a lounge for teachers to sit in. There was like a couch in the office by all the admin and the administrative assistants. And I was just like, how am I supposed to talk to other teachers? And then teachers would tell me like, oh yeah, some of us get together and have lunch in this room. And then it was
Mhm.
awkward because I'd like show up and I'm like, hey, and then they would always be talking. It was again like very clicky. Um,
Yeah.
Even though in the middle school, I did still go to any event that I could. Even high school, when I was a student teacher, they had like a happy hour and I showed up to it and like no one knew who I was except for like two people. And like the two people that I was basically like an aide for a student in a class, and that those were like the teachers that kind of knew me. Um, but
Good
yeah,
stuff anyways,
it's funny that you say that about the staff
Yeah.
lounge, though.
Yeah, the staff lounge, I would stay away from there. But I
How would
mean,
you then? So
some
you would
sites
go to
say
events?
no. What?
So you'd go to the events, like happy
If
hours?
I if I'm on a team where I don't know anyone, I would go to the events. Also, like if you're working at a high school, you go to the football games, that's less awkward. Go chaperone the dances, especially because you can bring your kids.
Yeah.
Like chaperoning events is a good thing to do. And then also like get to know your school secretary. That lady is the most powerful girl at your school. She'll introduce you. She will be on your side. She'll help get you a sub when you need one. Like, get to know all those kinds of people. Get to know the janitors. Get to know all those people that can help you because they'll introduce you to people. Ask to co-teach. I've always asked to co-teach at every site I've ever been at. I'm not really co-teaching. Like last year, I wasn't really co-teaching because I would be horrible at co-teaching dance. Let's just be honest. But I was supporting some kids in dance just because we had a really small program last year. So I would go to dance, and our dance teacher, she did not need me to be there because she was so naturally inclusive. Like I told her a few things, and that's what she did. And she never tried to put my kids in groups with just themselves. She always evenly divided them. She was just the most naturally inclusive teacher I've ever worked with. Like nothing to do with me. I literally sat there. I can't dance. I'm terrible at it. I would make little modifications and help with some things, but she was amazing on her own. But she became my friend, and then she introduced me to people, and just show up. It's awkward, but that's something that I would do. And this goes without saying, but like be kind and be accepting. They're gonna have different opinions, like, and you can just, like I said, like gentle advocacy. Like for example, I'm working with a teacher who is a band teacher, and he's amazing. He's an amazing band teacher. Um, Something that he has mentioned to me is a program called United Sound, which I'm not in band. I don't know anything about band. I know my student, he plays percussion. I don't even know what drum he plays. I think it's the snare. I'm not sure. It could be the bass. I don't know. But I know he's really good, and his band teacher says that he's actually the most talented drummer, like musician in his class, which is amazing. But like he's really into this program called United Sound. I think it's a program for individuals with disabilities. to participate in band. But I'm more passionate about why does there have to be a separate program, right? Like
Mhm.
my students, he's already in band and he's doing pretty good. Like I'd like to work towards him being in marching band, towards him doing other things within the band, but he's in band, he's doing well. We're working towards those things. I don't really want there to be a united sound. I don't care about that.
Right.
I'd rather him be included with his peers. But like it's all like for him, like he talks about that and he talks about some other students in his class, and I'm just like very gently being like that's awesome, and like providing suggestions and being like, oh, like, you're already doing so well with these students in your band. Like, I don't see a need for you to go above and beyond and do like a united sound program when we can just have them in the capo band, right?
Yeah.
So, just, nobody's like going to agree with you. Just see where they're coming from and try to come to a even ground.
And do you usually start with electives when you start increasing those minutes in general ed settings?
Usually start with electives. However, I have found that sometimes electives don't work for some kids. Like, and a good example in middle school was, oh, I love this student so much. One of my students, he was in PE and another elective, and PE, it wasn't working for him. He had a physical disability. He hated PE. He wasn't very athletic. They were playing flag football. It wasn't working for him at all. And I was like, well, you know what he is really good at? English. He's reading way above grade level. He loves to read. He loves books. He has really strong reading comprehension and listening comprehension. Like, let's try an English class. And I got a bunch of like slack from our admin at the time. And I just continued to be really positive and be like, well, his mom and I'm going to send his mom this podcast. His mom and I talked about it, and we think that English is going to be a really good fit for him. And, I already had an IEP meeting and I wrote it in the minutes. So he's going to be in English. And, she wanted me to take all the steps and like, I don't know. I don't really know what she wanted me to do exactly. But it wasn't, and the legal things that need to happen, it was already within the document of his IEP. So we put him in English, and I'm not going to say that there was zero struggles, because we worked through some things. A student had some behaviors, but we worked through it, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't his teacher last year, his eighth grade year. I was his teacher his sixth and seventh grade year, but I'm pretty sure his eighth grade year, even his eighth grade year without me, he continued to take English. And I also would like to do a shout out to Lindsay Jones, his English teacher. She was amazing, one of the best English teachers I've ever worked with. And that really helps too when you work with amazing general ed teachers that are just like, let's do
Yeah.
it. Like, and if you work well with that person, that's really helpful.
Yeah. Well, I love the advice of putting it in the IEP. That is one of my favorite ways to sneak in inclusion at a district who is putting up walls,
Yeah.
not making it very easy. Um, I even say like put it in goals of being like in a general ed setting, they will do
Yeah.
this, this, this. And it's, now you can't track the data unless they're in that general ed setting.
Sure. And most districts actually are working on bringing in the LRE and increasing the LRE percentages. So it's probably the district that's going to be fine with it. It's more like the school site that you might struggle with because they might not want to deal with it, or maybe their teachers aren't as open, or maybe they've just never done it before. So, as far as like working from a district level, I would say like 9 times out of 10, the district in theory is going to be supportive of putting students in the general education setting because it's least restrictive. But it might just be your school site or your admin or your general education teachers. But, building the relationships with the gen ed teachers is going to help.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And LRE is least restrictive environment for anyone who might not know. To me, LRE seems very like opinionated. Like I feel like people view the least restrictive environment I mean, kind of just like how inclusion looks different on every student. I feel like the least restrictive environment looks different on every student. And
Mhm.
sometimes that language gets misused, in my opinion, to keep kids in a special education classroom. Um, what would you say, what would you do if, especially, I mean, probably more from like your first school, but like, what would you say if a school was trying to say, like, well, the least restrictive environment for your student is going to be this special education classroom all day. Like they can't go into these other classrooms. Like, how do you think you'd handle that?
So I've never told had anybody in my 11 years, and how many different schools have I been at?
Oh
One,
my
two,
God, really?
4, 5. I don't think I've ever had anyone in my 11 years and the 4 or 5 schools that I've been at, including when I was a para. Um, so like 12 years or 13 years maybe, but 4 or 5 schools. I would have to do the math and I'm not going to do that right now. I don't think I've had anyone tell me no, like absolutely not. But I have had people, like I've said before, try to throw in some roadblocks, or maybe they originally told me no, but then when I reminded them that each one of my students is very individual, they've kind of backtracked a little bit. So that's probably what I would start with is reminding said human that every single student in your classroom is an individual, and they have an individualized education plan for a reason. And I think that's where I don't know if I coined this term, but I do say it a lot. Inclusion looks different on everyone. The grad school program that Kayla and I went to was very, very pro inclusion. And I think that's kind of where Kayla and I both stemmed from. But I have always had that mindset because I've been in the classroom and in the trenches for since I've been in grad school, essentially. Like I started teaching like very early on with my intern credential. And I've always kind of had that mindset with was yes, let's absolutely shoot for the least restrictive environment, but just keep in mind that it does look different on every student. So like, if you're looking at the continuum of services, a special day class, quote unquote, which is what I'm teaching right now, is deemed to be least restrictive for a lot of my students. However, within that program, they are pushed out into multiple settings. However, I do have a student whose actual least restrictive environment is in my classroom, or I don't have one right now, but I'm going to have one next year who I also had in middle school. He's going to be in our program. And he came from a non-public and he's doing amazing. And so for him, the actual least restrictive environment is going to be at his home public school in a special education classroom. However, he is going to be transitioning within the school. He's going to be transitioning into 3 different classrooms. That's transitioning with his peers. He's going to be in job programs. He's going to be going out in the community. He's going to be going to break and lunchtime with his general education peers. He's going to be having student aides come and work in the classroom with him. He's going to be involved in clubs. He's hopefully going to go to dances and other things. So
Well,
those
that
are all
already sounds
opportunities.
like not a segregated situation.
It's not,
Like,
but technically, if you look at his class schedule, it's going to say, in my district, we call it steps. So it's going to say steps all day. It's not necessarily going to be Miss Dana's steps class all day. It's going to be a mix of classes, but
and coming from a
technically,
non-public school, I think that is like a huge transition. But I also feel like this is something that I don't think I communicate very well, that like inclusion is always improving. Like the people around who are trying to support the students, like the teachers, the settings, like there's always going to be room for improvement. And I would never say that like I would never go to a school that has a special ed classroom and be like, everyone is just fully included now, and now we'll deal with it. Like, I don't think that would set us up for success. And I think that would, I mean, probably be a little traumatic for the students and for the teachers and for everybody because it's going to be a transition with like no support. And it sounds like you are so good at finding a way to keep this transition and like the inclusion ball rolling while supporting the staff and the paras and yourself and the peers and your students. Um, I mean, and it's really so amazing. And yeah, our grad program really was, I thought everyone was getting that kind of education.
No,
Like when I
our
went to
program
my
was
first school,
amazing,
oh
but
my, the first school I went to, I was just like, wait, you're a special ed teacher? You don't know about inclusion? Like, how do
mhm.
you not know this? Like, I
Yeah,
had no idea. Okay, last thing that we're going to talk about. We are already going over on time, and I knew that we would. You talked about job programs, and I know that there is like this, I don't feel like this voice is very big, but people talk about how coffee carts are not inclusive. But I would like to hear your opinion about that and what you guys do at your school for your job programs.
sure. So I do have a coffee cart and I love coffee cart. And more importantly, the kids love coffee cart. So, that's number one reason why I do it. So my personal opinion is that coffee cart is inclusive for a variety of reasons. Um, the first thing that I'm going to say about my coffee cart is that my coffee cart is 98. I mean, we probably start at 80% student run, and then by the end of the year, it's like 98% to 100% student run coffee cart. So my students do all the work. It's extremely structured. I have different jobs for the coffee cart. So we have a salesperson, a cashier, a business person, and then depending on the number of students and the number of carts, we possibly have an assistant. And the students do 100% of the tasks, such as with my other job programs as well. Like I'm really passionate about it being a student run program and tailoring your program to the students that you have. So, the coffee cart might look different every year. You might sell a different amount of things or different types of things or service a different amount of rooms or whatever. You just got to be creative and run with it for each year. Um, but my students do like at the end of the year, my students were doing like 99% to 100% of coffee cart. And it was amazing. And I had so many general education teachers comment, like so many of them said, I don't know what kind of magic you're teaching, but your kids have improved 30 times more within this one program than my students have in history, English, whatever, this entire school year. Like it's amazing to see them every day because they have improved so much and they have like genuinely learned all these skills. So that's one reason why I do it is because they are getting good experience for their lives post-secondary and building those amazing vocational skills. Um, as far as inclusion goes, I think that Coffee Cart does a really good job of number one for those kids that you have where maybe they are not in an elective currently, or PE might be too much for them, or whatever. Coffee Cart is a great opportunity for them to learn outside of your special education classroom, get experience across the entire school, see their general education peers, and their general education peers also see them doing a job and being independent and fulfilling those schools or skills. They also get to interact with different teachers, and it's a safe environment, right? Because you're interacting with teachers and staff members at their high school in their community that they'll hopefully see within their communities. So that's one reason why I think Coffee Cart is super inclusive. Another reason, like I said, is it shows the student's strengths. Um, and then the third reason is that's how I meet so many teachers is through Coffee Cart. Like me as a person, not only my students, they're meeting all different teachers and it's built me so many connections. Like we're going to explore, I coach out Spanish in San Francisco like a way long time ago. So it's always in the back burner. But three Spanish teachers participated in my coffee cart and got to see how awesome my kids were. And guess what? Next year we're going to have some kids in Spanish 1 because Spanish, for anyone listening, is a really awesome inclusive opportunity because kids are starting from the same playing field. Most kids go into Spanish 1 knowing hola, and that is it. So it's a really good opportunity for them to start. Oh, and the fourth or fifth, I don't know what reason I'm on as to why coffee cart's inclusive. Reason as to why coffee cart is inclusive is because those kids that you have with AACs, well, coffee cart is a beautiful opportunity for them to use their AAC devices. I have one student, I was his teacher in middle school, and oh man, me and our middle school SLP, we worked so hard with that AAC. We tried so hard, and all he wanted to do was say cookie, cookie, cookie over and over and over again. It was just cookie all day long. Like he was just playing. He thought it was funny. It was funny. But that was it for middle school, saying cookie all day long.
Yeah.
Okay, fast forward 2 years, I became his teacher as a sophomore. He was in my coffee cart program. I was 8 months pregnant. It was a beautiful time. I was tired. But I was like, you know what? We're gonna try the AAC again, and we're gonna only use it during coffee cart. We're just gonna structure this AAC in the beginning to get him used to it, and we're gonna use it coffee cart only. And I told the SLP and I'm like, can you just get me a loaner? I've tried this before with him. It didn't work. But like, I think if we used it in a very specialized setting, we could, increase his usage outside of the setting eventually. And I have a video. He uses his AAC with 100% accuracy in the most complicated coffee cart job, salesperson. So he's like going up to someone saying, good morning. Would you like coffee, tea, or a snack? The person orders, I would like coffee. He'll repeat the order, coffee. Then he'll say, coming right up. Then he'll walk out and he'll tell the barista, who is the one making the coffee, and the cashier, who's the one who has to tell them how much it costs. He'll be like Avery, which he can, vocalize and say, and then he'll push coffee. And so she'll know what to make, and the cashier will know what to charge for, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. So that's another reason why Coffee Cart's amazing, is because it's really great for the communication skills and those AAC users. It's structured and it's awesome.
That is so great. And that I loved that you like are meeting people, that you are like going out there and talking to the teachers and the peers and just the whole idea that it's child led. I think that is really important when it comes to anything. I mean, anything really regarding our students, like all students,
For
is like
sure.
focusing on like what their interests are, where they're passionate, and then like helping them find areas that like, they might not even know that they have strengths in. Because like finding that student really thrived in like a really structured way. And I think it's giving them like purpose of like we're giving him an AAC device and being like, come on, try it, like trying to get them to communicate, and it's just
He did have a
like,
purpose for it, because he's like, you can already, like, Miss Dana, you've been my teacher for this entire school year. You already understand everything that I'm saying. But when he takes his AAC, he cannot communicate, like I was saying earlier, like with our kids, sometimes we're one of the three people in their lives that can understand them and that know what they want and that can understand their words and their communication. But then they go out into the world and they want to communicate with their peers, or, I'm a secondary teacher, so like I want all my kids to have jobs one day, so they need to be able to communicate with their boss or their coworkers, or, at their community center or whatever. And these kids, like, they need to use an AAC because those people don't know them as well. And this was a beautiful opportunity for him to be able to do that, because he was interacting with not just me and my classroom staff. And he is one of those kids who, he's in PE and he does well, but an elective in a high school for 2 hours on a block schedule, we just aren't, there's not really a good fit for him right now. Like, there's nothing that he's super duper passionate about. He's gonna lose interest. He goes for a little bit of time, but at the end of the day, like, it hasn't been a good fit for a lot of reasons, and he is included to the maximum extent. But this program, Coffee Cart, helps him to be included even more. And I see how people don't think it's inclusive because it's only students with disabilities that do the coffee cart. But if you look at the other opportunities that they have by doing the coffee cart, I think that you can see
yeah.
that it can be inclusive. But I also think it depends. Like, you have to have a structured coffee cart. It cannot be a free for all. Like,
Yeah.
then it doesn't look, it's not a good look, you know. It has to be structured. It can't just be like, okay, who wants to do coffee cart today? Because then they're really not building any skills. You need to have a set amount of students that do it. It needs to be like every day, every other day kind of activity. Like for me, there's a lot of rules with coffee cart as to what how to implement it and how for it to be number one effective and number two inclusive. So
I am gonna leave. Is there anything you want me to leave up for you? Because usually I'm interviewing people who like have their little side hustles.
yeah, I
Weird.
don't have a side hustle. I
You did talk about the
am.
Instagram account that I'll.
Yeah, but that's like my school's Instagram account. So I don't think if people want to reach out to me and have any questions or just want to chat, I may do some tutoring in the future. I'm also really passionate about reading instruction. You can email me, Dana, Dana dot Gunnarsson, Gunnarson at gmail.com.
Awesome. And I will also put that below in case you did not get that long name.
Yeah, I know.
And I feel like you should just say your maiden name, right? I feel like there needs to be a new word for maiden name.
Yeah, so my maiden name was Zimpelman, so it's not any better. Gunnarsson, Zimpelman. I'm not winning with these last names, so they're always going to be bad. Not
Yeah.
bad. They're always going to be long and confusing with the spelling.
Well, I love it. And thank you so
But
much for coming onto the podcast, your first ever podcast. I'm glad I could.
I wanted you to disagree with me about something. I was ready.
Oh, I don't really disagree with people. I feel like I
You
am.
said you were like, we might disagree, and I was like, okay,
Well,
I'm
it
ready
was just
for it.
I mean, I think you even said it with the coffee carts that it is only for students with disabilities. I would be interested if like people without disabilities could like join it and like have that be like a more like because then they're like both the workers kind of thing, like a this I don't know
I
equal thing.
have TAs help with ours.
The TAs like teacher assistants.
That's what we call the program. It's general education peers come
Oh,
and do it, but they're more supporting the students. However, they do fill in if like students are absent, they'll do the jobs and stuff like that.
yeah,
But they're more support helping to support. So
yeah.
it's not like they're
Okay, well
doing it.
then the whole idea sucks, and I hate everything you just said.
I know. Well, I do actually feel like I think that that could work if the coffee cart was for younger grades. So if you were doing it at an elementary level, I think it would be awesome if like all the kids could participate. I just think that at the high school level, the students have to meet all of the requirements needed, and the jobs for the coffee cart are going to be a little bit too structured for general education students, or they would just need to work through them quicker to where our students need more time with each job. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you described it really well, saying what that maybe the cart is not totally inclusive, but it is leading towards like
Yeah.
genuine peer relationships and teachers like being educated on like what our students are capable of. So I feel like you said a lot of great stuff.
Being seen on the campus rather than just like being in the room. That's a big
Stuck in your
thing.
little room.
Yeah. Even though
Yeah.
my room is huge and amazing this year, so I'm not going to
And
complain about that.
chaperoning dances so then your students can come. That
Yeah.
was one of my things I did in middle school and I loved it.
Yep. I'm not going to say I love chaperoning dances, but I still do it.
Yeah, I am extreme extrovertness definitely helps making friends at
Yeah.
schools.
Yep.
Okay, well, I am going to end this podcast and we're just going to keep talking for like another 2 hours. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Inclusion
Thanks
starts
for
with you,
having me.
and we just want to help. Thank you, Dana, for everything.
Thanks for having me.